years ago, I looked into some technology that would automatically turn on my front porch light at night. I ended up not doing it because the technology was expensive and I needed to hire an electrician to do most of the work. It just wasn't worth it. But I recently went to the hardware store and purchased a smart light with an app that lets me get this done for around $10. No expert needed. In a lot of ways, this reminds me of how businesses think of machine learning and AI. Until recently, these technologies have been out of reach for the typical business user. Today, I want to show you how you can leverage Jiffy AI's invoice processing HyperApp to process invoices faster than ever using machine learning. All packaged in a single system, no engineer needed. Let's see how the HyperApp leverages machine learning to map the relevant fields, receive a new invoice, and post it to the financial system. I just received an invoice from a new vendor, so let's use it to train the system how to process it. All I have to do is upload the invoice. And the machine learning automatically extracts the relevant fields. Normally, when using OCR, I would have to manually map the fields in the document. Here, you can see our AI has located most of the fields for me. I just need to validate this is correct and add any fields not identified. Tables and line items are also identified and extracted. This is a huge time savings. And this gets better over time as the machine learning library is trained every time we add a new vendor. So we have a new vendor added, but how do their invoices get into the system and routed to the right person? All of these configurations are handled through default templates that make this really easy. Invoices can be imported by monitoring a mailbox, through a supplier portal, or through an application integration. The data is validated using built-in rules, like currency conversion or tax validations. And the invoices are routed to the correct AP analyst based on your business rules. You can also determine how you want these invoices posted to your financial system of record. Based on these settings, the system is going to automatically handle about 90% of the work. So the AP team just needs to review any exceptions. Let's log in as an AP analyst to see how we process the invoice. I can see here on the dashboard that I have an invoice that needs to be reviewed. I can easily see the image of the invoice as well as all the fields that were extracted. As I scroll down, I can even review all individual line items in a table. This makes it really easy for me as an analyst because I don't need to be familiar with every possible layout of an invoice. The data is always presented to me the same way, which makes it easier for me to review and approve. What used to take 5 to 10 minutes per invoice has just been done in under 30 seconds. This invoice looks good. So let's forward it on for processing. Just click forward and the invoice will be automatically posted to your system of record. So we've seen how machine learning dramatically improves the speed and accuracy of processing invoices. But here's the key takeaway. Just like smart lighting allowed me to easily light up my front porch, Jiffy AI allows you to take advantage of these complex technologies from a simple interface that business users can implement quickly. And the best part, you only pay for what you use. So there is no large upfront investment. We'd love to have a conversation so we can better understand your needs and show you how you can get started with our invoice processing HyperApp today.
everyone. We'll start in next 2 minutes. We're waiting for the audience to join in. Hello all. Very good morning. Am I audible? If somebody can just let me know.
Yes, yes, you are.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So a very good morning to everyone. Myself, Ekta Dubey, and on behalf of the Branalytics team and our presenting partner, Jiffy.ai, we welcome you all and thank you for being part of our webinar, Power Your Finance Processes Through Digital Transformation Journey. So before we start our webinar, there are a few guidelines that I would like to highlight and make you people aware of. Requesting all the attendees to be on mute when the speakers are taking the session. There would be a Q&A after each session where the attendees can ask their respective questions to the speakers. The guidelines are you need to raise your hands, unmute yourself and on your video, introduce yourself, your name, company designation, and put your questions to our speakers. So to start with, I would first like to introduce our presenting partner, Jiffy.ai. Jiffy, founded with a mission to radically change how enterprises automate complex business processes, Jiffy.ai puts the power of real-time innovation in businesses' users' hands, ranging from intelligent document processing and natural language processing to robotic process automation and low-code, no-code development. Jiffy.ai are pioneers in web-based automation solutions and believe that automation accelerates innovation, empowering enterprises with AI-powered intelligent automation solutions. Before we move to our keynote session, I would just like to throw some lights and insights on why we are here today and what is the focus of the webinar. We all know that automation has become a part of every organization's transformation, and these technologies are changing how the businesses work. Digital transformation has moved from buzzword to a critical need and reality for most businesses today. Almost every company has embarked on finance transformation journey. As organizations automate complex financial processes, businesses are moving to a highly advanced state of automation we call hyper automation. Today, we are here on this webinar to hear expert insights from our thought leaders on finance digital transformation journey and discover how automation can empower your finance and accounting teams in the digital era. The few highlights that webinar will focus on: unique challenges in deploying automation in finance and accounting, transforming finance and accounting process through HyperApps, how HyperApps is a game changer for the companies as they enter a new era of digital transformation post-COVID-19, and many more, which our thought leaders are going to cover. Not wasting much time, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Vishnu Pillai. To speak about him, Vishnu has been with KPMG for over 10 years and has worked in multiple sectors across India, Middle East, and Europe. During this time, he has helped build interesting automation journey for his clients, and he is going to share his insights on Finance 4.0, a tremendous opportunity. Over to you, Mr. Vishnu, to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ekta, and thank you so much for having me on the session. So a lot of what I might be talking about is based as a practitioner's view. So when I say practitioner, so while I am at heart a consultant, a lot of the work that I do is with respect to implementing solutions out there in the market for clients of various types, small and medium, mid-sector, and large enterprise. I'll I've sort of put down some of my thoughts in a small deck, and you can't blame a consultant for having a deck, right? So here it is. Can you see this screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, great. Perfect. So while the topic is transformation of finance 4.0, so it's also a question of some of the important words. Important words being transformation, digital, and enabler. So transformation means many things to many people. The word transformation is today used as loosely as probably strategy was used back in the 2005, 2006, 2007 era. And strategy means nothing unless you execute. So similarly, transformation is today used as a panacea for a lot of ails. And technically, you can't you bring about culture change in your organization. But there are various, but today, given technology and availability and affordability of technology, there are various means and modes to impel an organization, howsoever reticent it might be, at the top or mid-level, into the new age. And that's why I call digital as a seemingly painless panacea for a lot of ailments. And the third word being enabler. So just because you bought a technology doesn't mean that, okay, you get to your destination. You have to use your technology as a vehicle, and you need to enjoy your journey. And the technology, and so you could probably have a very cheap bike, but if you maintain that bike well, you can get more value out of that bike on some of these long journeys than what you would get from a Harley, however expensive it might be. So these three words, transformation, digital, and enabler, are very important for any organization, and especially in India. And I do a lot of my work in India. While we say 4.0, or we use the word or the phrase 4.0 for a lot of things, industry 4.0, capital 4.0, but 4.0 again is more or less like a pot at the end of the horizon. Typically, even if we set a goal to get there and stated objectives to get there in 3 to 4 years, we usually find a lot of the organizations that are trying to do this alone usually miss that target or get there in a suboptimal manner. So 4.0 is probably a view of the future. And we have definitely seen a lot of companies actually hit all or check all the boxes and hit their targets well ahead of their time. Okay, well ahead of the slated time. So this is basis some surveys that we've done in the US region. And of course, the big elephant in the room is what we are going through right now. I'm in Mumbai. Looks like we're probably going to go into some phases of a lockdown. But does business stop? Business does not stop. Does improvisation stop? That doesn't stop either. In fact, a lot of companies who have innovated have actually had a better year closing March, or will have a better year closing March than they had in the previous financial year. And that's because they have actually taken innovation or they've taken challenges by their horns, used innovative tools, techniques, major changes in process, very improvisational use of technology to hit their goals and pivot to a quasi-remote way of working. And I've seen a significant amount of innovation happening across various sectors in the last 6 to 9 months. I work a lot in the technology sector, pharma sector, consumer packaged goods. So these are three or four sectors that I work a lot in. And I recently started working in the last 2-3 months in the reality sector as well. And some of the stuff that I've seen happen over the last or during COVID has really opened my eyes as to what we in India can achieve. So while of course some of these findings are precise to the US region, I think a lot of this can also be applied to our Indian context. Most important, COVID is something that is probably here to stay. How so many jabs you take, you need to live with the new reality that there would always be a suspicion of proximity-led contact. And as a result, the way that we used to work in close confines, etc., has to go away. That also means that a significant amount of office space will get underutilized, and as a result, routine work that used to be done by 100 people in a room will probably now need to get completely dispersed away. the work does not disappear, but the way you do it will have to change. Experience centricity and growth, changing workforce demographics, converging industry models, the shifting geopolitical and regulatory environment. All of this is today being spurred by this fancy thing called coronavirus. And for example, at say KPMG, we moved from an office-based client on-site based working model to a remote model in all of like 4 days. Okay, at a large, I think it's JP Morgan, who had slated for the rollout of MS Teams over 3 years. They achieved it in like 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So when there is a very persuasive force of nature propelling you to do things, people innovate the hell out of situations and circumstances and get to an endpoint much faster than, or much sooner than they had even anticipated to. 76% of the CEOs agree that growth relies on ability to challenge and disrupt business norms. People who had tried to stick on, and I'm talking about companies in all revenue segments, whether it be a 500 crore company or a 1,000 crore company or a 4,000 crore company, people who have tried to stick on to their traditional ways of working have got wiped out or acquired. Okay, a large majority of executives are today focusing or allocating a tremendous amount of their resources. So typically, we used to say that IT budgets should be between 1 to 4% of your top line. Today, while technically the IT budget has sort of come down, a new pocket called the digital budget has come up, which has got a couple of legs in both technology, marketing, sales, and new product development. And we are seeing digital budget spends go up anywhere between 2 to 4%, 2 to 5% of the top line. And people are willing to put money into digitization, even if they are not seeing returns like they would anticipate to see returns in 6 months or 3 months, and they're willing to give it time. 66% of CEOs are creating new workforce models with human workers augmented by automation. So see, the best model, the best example of this is another large British bank, where today in the organization structure of various departments, we have a bot reporting into the SBU head. So in the SBU head's org structure, we have a bot which has got another bunch of bots reporting into the master bot, and we folks sometimes go in and do audits of those bots. So just like when we do an audit of the department, we do audits of those bots. So like it or not, automation is here to stay. And companies that get inspired by what some of the slightly more, innovation first companies have taken up, say in the Western Hemisphere or say in China, it behooves us to actually, if not follow, but at least, take inspiration from some of these trends and use our own Indian brains to improvise. Now, coming back to the finance function. So the finance function is, and I talk to at least a couple of CFOs on a daily basis, and I kid you not. So as a partner of a Big Four firm, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients, which includes a lot of top management interaction interlock. And as a result, I talk to at least 2 to 3 CFOs on a daily basis across, again, like I said, companies of multiple revenue sizes, multiple sectors. And the one common trend with all of them is that they're talking to us about, okay, how can I move forward in quantum leaps? No company that I've spoken to wants to, at least in their mind or in their heart, I would call it, wants to grow at just 5% or 7%. Everybody's saying, can I double growth in 3 years or 4 years? And why don't you tell me, don't advise me, tell me about how I can do it. So, and a lot of these conversations have the blessing, or rather majority of the conversations have the blessing of the board. So it's not an exploratory conversation anymore. It's saying, come to me with a plan and let us start working on the project. And it's probably also impelled by the fact that India has really opened up to foreign investment. There's a lot of foreign competitors who are vying for the Indian rupee. in the Indian markets. And as a result, if we do not improve our productivity, if we do not improve our cost competitiveness, if we do not improve the marketability of what we are manufacturing in India, whether it be services or products, we'll probably have to take a step back and watch something manufactured in China or France or even Bangladesh get into the hands of the Indian consumers, right? And consumer behavior is sticky. Once they start appreciating something else, it's very difficult to swing them back until something dramatic happens. So some 5 trends that we think a lot of CFOs will have to start adopting to or adapting to, enabling new technology and automating everything. Again, back in 2005, 2007, it used to be the finance function that used to be taking, or that used to be the devil's advocate, saying when say the markets or sales function or the technology function goes to the board and says, can we do this? Then the finance function used to probably take the devil's advocate hat and say, do you really need it? Today, we are seeing, like I said, the CFOs coming to us and saying, we need it. And the latest example being, a large defense manufacturer based in South India, where I'm talking directly to the CFO to propel some large technology transformation. The CFO is saying, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about approvals and things from the board. I'm taking care of it. I need this to happen. So that's a cultural change that we're seeing over the last 10, 15 years. Even people who have been embedded in a role are changing their mindset in India just because of external competitive influences. Serving as a strategist and lead enterprise, and so as to lead enterprise performance. Today, the CFO, again, of a large loots company based out of Mumbai that we are working with, this particular CFO is actually almost like a business owner. I mean, everybody respects him, and he is as interested in value creation on the front end as he is about the fiduciary responsibility to his stakeholders and shareholders. Managing and monetizing data, there is no way to underscore the importance of data. There was a study recently conducted by KPMG that said that no firm utilizes more than 85% of the data being churned by the enterprise internally for any sort of insights or analysis. And just imagine, and when there's 85% of data left there untouched, we still go outside and start looking at social data. How can I look at those trends? There are enough trends that might be afforded by SAP's SD module. If you're able to sit down and analyze the data on the sales, on the debtors aging, on the consumer preferences for buying. So, and today, large ERPs are being managed more or less directly by the finance function. And today they're starting to look at the historical data that is with them to identify customer trends, selling trends, material trends, and accordingly change strategy over the next 6, 9, 12 months. And pivoting is very quick. So the remaining 2 are more or less like, these 2, quickly adapting to customer needs and modernizing skills and capability. These are, cardinal rules, right? So no one on this call will deny that the importance of these 2. So I won't spend much time on it. If we are not having these 2 close to our heart, we probably won't have a job in 6 months to 12 months. It probably may not be taken over by a bot, but it will probably be taken over by a more capable human being who has these skills. So on this slide, what I've tried to do is I've tried to outline some of the dramatic changes that are happening. I think it would be more suitable for you to just look at this. This is again a compendium basis my personal experience and a lot of collective intelligence that we have in the firm, and some external inputs as well. So we know for a fact that in the future finance function, and all of this is with respect to how finance will probably transform. There's a chance that, or rather it's already happening. Back in 2010, 2012, when we used to deploy large systems, the conversation was how to make the system a more effective system of record. Today, that system of record concept is a concept that is anyway taken for granted. It's a question of how can I modify, or rather, how can I modify how the organization thinks basis the data that is getting captured in a more or less seamless manner. So that's why I'm saying that finance leaders will be more often than not spending up to 50% of their time on value adding activities rather than routine activities, because people who are still working on finance and managing routine activities are probably missing out on a huge opportunity out there to actively deploy technology and manage cost effectively. And once you deploy the technology, it's not just cost, but also the chance of human error, etc., will diminish to a great extent. I probably have a slide on that. So another important point was this particular instance. Large Indian auto manufacturer, when it had crossed $1 billion in top line, had around 520 finance people or people in the finance function. And today, at 3 times that top line, they have reduced it by almost 20%. And that is by innovating the hell out of its enterprise resource planning software, by utilizing in-house bots that have been created by its large team of technology people, of course, and they are now actually looking at the next wave of innovation, that is wave 2 in terms of cognitive. Another thing is around agile finance teams, project teams built around OKRs. So OKRs, in case you've not heard of this before, this is a term that was coined by Google to replace KRAs and KPIs. So KRAs are key result areas, KPIs are key performance indicators, OKRs are objectives and key results. So there's a lot of literature out there about it, but Google runs on this concept of OKRs. It was evangelized by a dawn of a good American university, and it was taken up as a pilot by the founders at Google. And today, OKRs run the entire strategy, or strategy at Google is run. Strategy and performance monitoring is run using OKRs, and a lot of automation actually, and some of the automation tools that we use, whether it be RPA, whether it be chatbots. All of these have linkages back into how these OKRs are monitored, and data is actually picked out from the source systems to figure out the performance of these OKRs. So, and another thing that I'm seeing in a lot of mid-sector finance companies is this thing called finance sprints. So if you are from technology, sprint would be a word that would be quite familiar to you. It's an iterative, agile way of working where you break down a task into its components, and then you try to achieve the component, and then do a feedback loop using a PDCA cycle to go into the next sprint. Similarly, finance is also looking at how to look at breaking down individual strategic objectives into sprints, putting small teams around the sprints, achieving them, and then moving it into a larger target, or moving it into the achievement of a larger target. And of course, as a result of sprints, you're going to be operating in the startup mode rather than in the old legacy babudam mode of finance or any other department. You will be operating like you have the average age of the finance function is definitely going to come down. Now, along with the average age of the finance function, also what's actually going up is the technology quotient, or the understanding of technology for each of the members of the finance function. People who are probably not investing in upping the technology portion of the finance function are going to be people who will probably be regressing a bit. So I would request people from finance who are probably on this call to start investing more and more in upping the skills of your team in various IT areas. Now, I wouldn't spend much time on this fourth row. A lot of this you would have read about, and the only thing I want to tell you is that it's not hype. Words like a blockchain, which used to be where robotic process automation was probably 5 years ago. Today, we are seeing banks use blockchain to improve technology trust, to remove middlemen, and they've moved away from the proof of concept stage through to actual production systems. Okay, so whether it be the large companies like TCS or whosoever, they're implementing blockchain into, or they're replacing algorithmic trust-based coding networks, which are, if you can call it, rule-based coding mechanisms, with blockchain for doing a lot of validation using very evolved levels of cryptology. And another thing that's happening is moving away. So if I can call RPA and that to rule-based RPA as the first wave, the finance function today in at least two of the companies that I'm working with, and funnily enough, both of these are in pharma, are actually looking at figuring out how can I use second wave technology, second wave being on the cognitive side, to actually start putting in machine learning and artificial intelligence into some of the routine tasks. Of course, look at the third point. Companies have started using AI linked speech to text converters to convert strategic conversations into actionable points. So this is actually being done by our firm in the US and being provided as a service to some of our clients. Okay, it decreases time to action and improves the actual outcome is improved through something called context matching. Of course, what I have in the fifth row here might actually strike at the heart of audit, which is probably 1/3 of my core business. But yes, audits are getting cheaper because of the utilization of intelligent automation. And the last two rows, again, don't want to spend too much time because this already started happening in India. A lot of the rigor around data governance and data management today is propelled through the finance function. No other function has got as much interest in having clean, pristine data as the finance function, and that's why. So, funnily enough, this is one area where Indian companies are paying much more attention per dollar spent or per rupee spent than their Western counterparts. Okay, the cleaning and utilization of clean data, and that's a very good sign. In fact, a lot of the work that we do outside India uses Indian references as a backbone for designing processes. Okay, so what does this all lead to for the finance function? Some of these things strategy and value management, risk and compliance are going to get safeguarded or are going to get improvised or innovated through these four pillars: extreme automation, data analytics and insights, organizational agility, and modern workforce. Okay, so I just probably, spend half a minute on this slide for you to just absorb what is there here. Again, the reliance on humans to actually provide accurate data, or the reliance on human to human networks to actually provide reliable data. If your company is still relying on those sort of networks, then there is a huge opportunity for you to actually ask folks in the automation business, what can you do for me? Okay, because most of the leaders who have actually achieved the benefits or already started achieving some of the benefits that I had spoken of in the beginning with respect to Finance 4.0 have let go of the human to human networks and have moved at least onto a human to machine teaming in order to get to some of the things that are mentioned here. For example, on-demand insight, AI-enabled projections. For example, a small bot that we had created for the proprietor of a large Chennai-based packaging company. He did not want to look at, say, the ERP for getting very quick insights into how the day has closed with respect to sales and some of the other key metrics. He wanted a bot, and this was back in 2018. So we actually created a custom bot for him, which he uses more than actually logging into the actual ERP that we deployed for him. So if that is the amount of trust that someone at the top, and this is a 2,100 crore top line company, if that's the sort of trust that someone at the top is putting into a bot, then it just all asks us a question, right? As to why can't you take the same approach? Because okay, the bot may, and trust me, it's not that the bot will always give you the right answer. There have been huge, tales of some large banks investing in artificial intelligence and not getting the answers right. I know for a fact that some of the companies have got VPs and EDs sitting and trying to identify and error correct the outcome of various AI tools used in things like controls management, audit management, and they have dedicated a year to year and a half to actually error correct and teach the bots. But I'm saying in India, there are ways to get around it. Innovation is more affordable. You can afford to make mistakes without impacting your bottom line, as long as you don't make the same mistake twice. So it's innovation is more affordable in India, and I would recommend that people who are, like I said, still relying on human to human networks, please do take a step forward and open the window and see what's out there. So I think this message is very important. Business as usual is no longer an option. The limitation is no longer technology and what it can do, but the imagination of those who must deploy it. Okay, so if you are, like I said just probably half a second ago, if you are constrained by what you understand of what technology can do for you, it's your problem. And the sooner you remove those tinted glasses and see and smell the roses, the better it is for you and the organization. And I assure you, there will at least be a 5 to 10% improvement across all the key metrics. May not be the monetizable ones, but actually the non-monetizable ones within 3 to 6 months of you adopting some innovations in agile thinking. So this is probably like a landscape diagram of what or how the finance function will transform. And my request is to look at these 3 color codes. So wave 1 robotics is what's there in purple. The blue one talks about enhanced automation with some amount of ML, and this cognitive with full-blown ML. And where things can get to in an industry, in a finance 4.0 sort of an environment. So this is typically some of the roles being played by the finance function with some amount of drill down. And this is where, you can actually get to, assuming that, you do, you take innovation as a program, as a focused program, and allocate some budgets to it. Again, we are working with various clients in India and abroad to enable, if not all of it, at least parts of it, because some of the companies are very, very complex, and you move a coin here or there, something else, it's like a butterfly effect. So we have to be careful in some, but a lot of clients have just said, just change it for me and help us with a revamped process that will take us to 4.0. So again, so this is just indicative, and this is not prescriptive, this is just indicative. But this is where the future is going to, and we are seeing, or we envisage that a lot of these blues that we see will go to green by 2025, and a lot of these purples that we see will go to at least blue, if not directly to green. Okay, this is my last slide. So in summary, we are probably here on the first two today. A lot of companies, especially in the SMB and the mid-market sector, some of the more innovative startups, who are probably in the 100 crore range, have already moved this zone, okay, enhanced automation, and a lot of work today on a proof of concept basis is happening on the recent piece, this cognitive automation. Well, of course, thinking like a human is the holy grail, and while we can always utilize self-driven cars as a model to say, what, machines are already thinking like us. Trust me, it's not going to happen, at least for the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years. But it's going to happen sooner than you think. Okay, it is realistically think. So definitely by 2035. We anticipate a lot of what we probably try and do in finance today, the traditional role models in finance, to change dramatically. So the best example of that is the sort of hiring that we do as a consulting firm. Today, while of course we still hire a lot of chartered accountants, we are giving preference to chartered accountants who have invested in learning something about technology, some coding, because and the kids nowadays, they come to us and say, you know what, I've figured out a faster way to scan this data. And those are the people who will probably be leading finance in the next 10 to 15 years. So I hope I've given you a quick overview of where things are going to get to in the next 10 to 15 years. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishnu. Glad to have your insights on the subject. So the audiences, we are open for the Q&A session. So as I've already shared the guidelines in the chat room that you need to raise your hands on your video, unmute yourself and put your question to our thought leaders, if any. So we are open to take a Q&A with Mr. Vishnu. So any nominations coming in? Yes. Do we have any question? You can raise your hands. Yes, we have a question from DGM Blue Star. So please put your question. Yes, you can put your question. Mr. Deepak, you can put your question.
Yeah, hi. Hi, this is Deepak. I look after all finance IT initiatives at Blue Star, especially in area of SAP. Hi, Vishnu. Thanks a lot for your insights on this. I had a specific question with respect to invoice processing. Okay. Now, e-invoice has taken pays up in India, right? Now, many companies, especially the tax teams, are worried about its losing of ITC, whether the IRN or QR code given by them are genuine or not. Okay, so many companies are looking for the solution which will help in end-to-end verification of what vendor is given on its invoice till capturing in their ERP and then getting flown to their return system also in returns. So is there any solution which is coming up in the market, or is it readily available where this automation process with respect to invoicing, especially capturing of IN and all, can be done? This question I'm asking more specific from invoicing point of view, that is from IRN and e-invoicing point of view.
Yeah, so I have some a dedicated focused team that actually works on this entire e-invoicing project, and it's been active in the market. And see, the beauty is that we have actually tried and tested multiple technologies, and I think we have bedded down on one. So I'm happy to have you talk to someone in the team. But again, some of the technologies that we're using are specifically from the RPA stable that we are using to deploy these particular tools or these particular functionalities. Okay, so especially on the QR code identification and deduplication, all of that. So we are utilizing some of these things. So of course there are two ways to look at this: the more affordable, mass market, untested components, and if you are looking at something that is slightly more reliable, it will cost a bit more money, but reliability is a couple of dimensions higher. So I put my number. If I put my number on the chat, you could probably connect me, or rather connect with me, and I'll connect you with the right people. And I had a question coming in from Ramesh Joshi. So Ramesh, you could also WhatsApp me or call me after this, and I'm happy to have a chat.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. So do we have any more questions? We can take one more with Mr. Vishnu.
Yeah, hi, Ramesh Joshi. I'm from TVS Chakra. I'm looking after finance. Vishnu, my other question is related to taxation only. As per the new finance bill, we need to know whether the vendor has filed their ITR in the last 2 years. So it's very, difficult to comply with that. So any API available from the, government of income tax department where we can find some solutions where automatically the system will check whether the vendors file the return, and then we can do the compliance of TDS rates depending on that.
So this was also something that got discussed in a tax seminar, okay, almost 2 or 3 months ago, when, I mean, it was late last year. So again, and there are technologies out there. Again, I can put you in touch with someone who in the tax team who can help you. But there are technologies out there, because similar questions have been asked by finance function, operations, and CFOs of various companies. You know, because otherwise doing it is a manual headache. And that's precisely probably one of the you know, objectives of having seminars like this, right? How to get past those manual headaches. So there are again, like in the previous question, more than one particular way of doing this. Happy to connect you with the tax team that looks at this.
Fine, thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think we'll have one more question. We'll quickly take that. It's from Mr. Algernon. Mr. Algernon, if you can put your question.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Vishnu, wonderful job. I wanted to know if it will be possible to have access to the recording and the presentation so that we can study it a bit more after the event. And also, you mentioned going from RPA to more cognitive focused processes. I wanted to know, what do you think about the opportunity for processes like invoice processing and document processing? Sometimes we encounter situations where potential customers have already embarked on automation using RPA, and they don't necessarily perceive that they need cognitive tools right away. Do you see, how big do you see the opportunity to transition from traditional RPA, where you already have solutions in place, to the more cognitive types of more advanced automation that really represents new tools and new platforms? Can you speak on this, please?
Sure. So again, you know, I'm more of an advocate of utilizing what you have and innovating the hell out of it, rather than looking at acquiring more technology to chase down a problem that anyway doesn't get, or anyway was not thought out well when you procure the original technology. And folks like, you know, Jiffy, on who are probably sponsoring this, I have some understanding of their products and some of the other you know, traditional RPA tools. A lot of these folks already have ML AI, which forms the bedrock of cognitive, embedded into, if not their current, at least in the very near products that have been outlined in the evolution path of their products. So, and the reason I'm saying this is, today cognitive automation, like you rightly mentioned, Algie, is no longer you know, a desirable item that is being thought of by CFOs and other executives. Cognitive is something that's out there. Cognitive is something that was earlier being utilized by the business function, say in the R&D department of, say, a pharma company, to spot out things that, you know, a human couldn't do. But today that has transcended from the business function into mass market functions like finance, supply chain, and being used to actually reduce or improve things like error correction. So cognitive, you know, if you ask the providers of your original tools, there is a very high chance, if those tools were part of a tier 1 segment, that they are already working, if not they've already delivered cognitive as part of their near future, if not immediately available product suite. You know, when we use cognitive, one of the things that we have to worry about is the amount of learning that we'll have to invest, or learning time that we'll have to invest in getting that tool trained. But the benefits that accrue as a result of this investment are tremendous. Okay, so with a certain amount of investment, you can get up to 3 to 4 fold of your investment. But again, you have to make that leap of faith away from wave 1 to wave 2. Again, do not buy new technology. Just ask your OEM, and of course, if the OEM does not have access to such improvisations, then it's important that you change your OEM, right? So,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishnu, for sharing your insights and answering all the questions. So, quickly moving to our next session, I would like to invite our next speaker, Chris Subramanian, President and co-founder Jiffy.ai. Chris has over 20 years of experience in the IT industry and is passionate about building organizations, whether through global competency centers, technology practices, global sales organizations, or startups. Chris is highly successful at taking ideas to execution at scale and has held key leadership roles across global organizations, including Tech Mahindra and Capgemini. An engineer by profession, Krish is passionate about customers and technology, and he would be sharing his insights on automation in finance and accounting, why you need HyperApps. Over to you, Chris, to state your session. Krish, I think you're on mute, please.
Yeah, I think that's the most common used term. Apologies. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, you're clear.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out on a weekend. I thought I'll put a poll question to start with. How many of you are on pajamas and watching TV? So you could do a show of hands on the chat. So yeah, coming to the topic, I'll introduce myself. As Ekta said, I'm a co-founder at Jiffy.ai. While today's topic is around automation in finance and accounting, I would like to also touch upon the evolution of technology where we are today, like what Vishnu mentioned earlier. There's been a lot of focus around middle office, back office transformation using BPM, RPA, intelligent automation, and a lot of things happening in the last 2 to 3 years, especially the last year, given what happened with the pandemic. So now I'd like to introduce a couple of concepts, right? There's been a lot of talk about AI, low code, no code, RPA, etc. So is it hype or is it real, right? So what the industry is showing is that there is the size of the low code, no code market is going to get to close to 100 billion in a few years from now. Now, technologically, no code sounds fancy, but what does it actually mean? That means it is powering business users, empowering people in business functions to build their automations and innovations on a fast track manner, right? So while IT and the information technology, IT part of the organization can focus on a lot of robust platform foundations, delivering innovations and automations is going to be empowered into the business users' hands. Now, we also see that around 31% are planning to execute automation project in the next 12 months, right? And that numbers have gone up. This is slightly older data last year, but I'm sure that's doubled as we speak. Now, having said that, that's all great news, but there is a problem, right? 3 in 10 automation projects fail. Now that's because of lack of intent of automation, right? Now we have been working with customers, partners. While there is excitement about automation and AI, right? It is important to choose the use case. Now, take an example, right? You're doing order capture automation. Now orders could come through Excel sheets, orders could come through PDFs, orders could come through email. Now, when you decide the success of a process like that, it is important to understand what is structured, what can be applied to automate a structured process, what can be applied to automate an unstructured process. That's where a combination of RPA, AI, machine learning, all of them comes together. But at the same time, it's very important to decide where to start, what's the ROI, what's the cost of technology, and what's the success that you're looking for. And finally, the most important aspect is failures are due to the high complex process that are in place. So I'll touch upon that in a little bit, why this high percentage of failure happens. Right. Was there a question? No, I don't think so. Okay, so while I mean, if you have any questions while I'm going through the slides, feel free to ping me on the chat as well. I'll pick them up as I see them or towards the end of the session. Now, if you look at the technology landscape, right? I mean, these are all the jargons that you will hear. There is business process automation that has evolved from the IBM FileNet days to BPM to IBPM to BPMS, right? Where it is becoming, while earlier projects used to take 6 months, 12 months to implement a BPM solution, we are moving into a stage of absolute intelligent low code, no code, in fact, no code based BPM capability. So if you're building a workflow, building an automation, we are working with a large manufacturer in India where they are trying to implement workflow and they're using our platform to do that, is because you necessarily don't need to invest in a large BPM platform asset, because all of these technologies are coming together. Second aspect is RPA. Now, RPA started, as Vishnu mentioned, 1.0 was automating tasks, lift and shift data from one system to another, from an Excel spreadsheet to a system, from a system to an Excel spreadsheet, do a few calculations which are repetitive. Basically, it replaced the macros in an elegant manner. But obviously, that technology also has evolved. I'll come to that in a bit. And then finally, why do we have a lot of challenge in finance and accounting today when it comes to automation? Is the challenge of variations of data. Now, you have invoices. If you are a large manufacturer, you have at least 500 to 5,000 suppliers sending you invoices. Now, these are all in different formats. A lot of large, organizations have moved to the EDI route, have moved into e-invoicing in some cases, as it was discussed earlier. But still, there is challenges in extracting the data. So OCR technology was used. OCR is good at looking at fixed data in a fixed format and pulling it out as long as the quality is good. Then you have the challenge of somebody receiving an invoice and writing a handwritten note on an order number on top of it, which makes it very messy for somebody to extract. Then you have ability to read handwritten other data using concepts like machine learning, deep learning, etc. So a lot of evolution of technology in that space. So while all these are important, it is extremely important, to my earlier point, why a large number of projects fail is inability to apply all these technologies in a consolidated, easy to use manner. Now, if you look at an enterprise landscape, right, infrastructure, traditionally it has been all on premise, especially in our country. A lot of people have installed things on their premise. There's been always a worry about data security, but you slowly see, and in fact, the last couple of years, accelerated adoption of moving into the cloud, given where we are. Then you have the core systems. You cannot do away with core systems, as Vishnu mentioned, system of records, whether it is an ERP, whether it is a CRM, whether it is a BPM, right? There are core systems that are out there which are important. Is everybody not able to hear me? I just got a message saying my voice is coming in and out.
No, you're clear, Krish. You're quite clear.
Okay, thank you. Now, that's on the second aspect of the technology landscape. Now, third, there's been a lot of innovation in this space, right? While these ERP, CRM systems were built with the basic assumption that humans would operate them, right? When you look at SAP, I mean, the idea was that while a lot of backend integration happens, to look at various human interactions, the idea was that humans would operate on top of them. That's why the need for a layer on top of enterprise applications came into picture. It started with workflows, then came APIs, then came RPA, then came intelligent document processing, and finally AI for decision making and other activities. Now, this is all good, but still, while it is low code, there is still code getting written. So what's happening is, if, for example, there was a question from Blue Star, how do I implement invoice processing automation, right? Now, the irony of this is what has happened in the last 2-3 years with low code based platforms is everybody is trying to do the same thing in their own space with no repeatability, reusability. While there are bot stores out there, all of them are at a task level. So what we need to really exploit this technology evolution is, what we need is ability to build apps that are reusable, scalable, repeatable across customers, across industries. So using all these technologies with the underlying core systems, with the low code, no code capability, can we deliver hyper apps? Can we build hyper apps that not just one department in an organization uses, one organization uses? Can there be a marketplace of hyper apps? And that's what we are trying to do, where within every function within an organization, there is a potential of building 3-4 hyper apps, low code, no code, right? But hyper apps that can be repeated and reused across organizations. Now, one of the challenges of low code approach is, while you look at RPA, BPM, OCR, they are very thin technology, right? Because there is no domain in it, there is no logic in it. And what happens is, on top of it, 80% of what you do is custom scripting, though it is not code actually written, but you're writing instructions to make a functionality work, right? You take a bot, but you need to teach the bot where to extract the data from, how to extract it, what to validate, all of that. So that what is indirectly happening, while there's excitement, there is creating a large technical debt within all these organizations. Now, our focus is to make sure you avoid that technical debt. Like, I mean, we brought in RPA to remove macros, but now we are breaking what do we do with the RPA code that's being written by every developer? If you want to look at the next stage of transformation, what are you going to do to replace all that code? So that is something that we need to think through very seriously. So a quick overview of Jiffy, what we are, what we do, right? So we are a Series A funded company. We are headquartered, built by a bunch of Indian entrepreneurs across India, US, across the globe. Offices in Palo Alto, Boston, Bangalore, Trivandrum. I am based out of Bangalore, India. And we've been working with fortunate enough at the size, working with large Fortune companies to implement some of these capabilities I talked about. Now, from a capability standpoint, we believe in two things. One is low code based process automation of complex automations. That's what we power using Jiffy.ai Automate, where we combine automation, machine learning, document processing, workflow, all into a native platform. It is extremely important because if you want to succeed in automating a complex process, you need to have control on your technology, which is maintainable and manageable. And on the other extreme, we have Jiffy.ai Innovate, where this is right now in beta, where we are actually using the platform to generate applications. So without coding, you're actually building applications, not just automating on top of existing applications. Whether it is your banking portal, your supplier portal, whether it is any complex front-end customer-facing experience, we have the ability to use Jiffy.ai Innovate. And finally, HyperApps are packaged solutions to solve a specific problem. So there are some HyperApps that we build as Jiffy.ai. There are some HyperApps that our partners build to take to their customers, and customers themselves have the ability to build HyperApps. And that's what I will show with respect to the finance and accounting function. So the platform, as I mentioned, is versatile. It combines RPA, machine learning, document processing, workflow, all in a single user experience. So you don't have to buy 4 technologies, one OCR provider, one BPM provider, one RPA provider, right? Then integrate a machine learning model from somewhere. And what happens is the total cost of ownership goes high and the maintenance footprint becomes very high, right? That's what we are avoiding using Jiffy.ai. So with that, I will get into finance and accounting, right? As Vishnu mentioned in his slides, there are a number of areas there is huge potential to automate, right? From invoice processing, bank reconciliation, remittance processing, reconciliations, book closures, right? So many areas where there is potential to automate. Now, as I mentioned, what's the approach to do that? How do you build it in a sustainable manner? How do you make sure that the technology is ready for change. For example, a lot of people spend a lot of effort on OCR based technology for invoice processing. Now e-invoicing has come. How do I shift? What do I do with my existing investments? Right? I mean, because the number of suppliers going to send it through, e-invoicing is going to go higher. So how do I do the audits, as somebody asked? How do I validate these are genuine barcodes and things like that? So you need to have the ability to quickly move with the regulatory requirements, with the technology changes, and your business process requirements. So if you look at an account payable automation scenario, drill it down further, right? Master data, right? So many places there isn't a proper master data management strategy. There isn't a vendor invoice pay, validation processing strategy. There isn't a journal virtual processing automation. Today, people still manually enter JVs during month end, which creates a lot of workload in a shared service kind of scenario. So I will explain what an invoice processing hyper app means and how do we extend this concept to other automations that you want to do within an enterprise. Now, I wish it was as this simple, right? You receive an invoice, all you need to do is process it and pay the vendors. That's it, right? As long as we do that, the job is done. But if you look at what the market says, it wouldn't be surprising to see what are their pain areas. 70% of people who responded to this said manual data entry is the biggest pain. A lot of them say lost or missing invoices, right? Tell me who has not faced this, right? I mean, a vendor keeps following, where is invoice? Oh, sorry, we missed it. Can you please resend it? There is no way to track that. Lack of visibility in outstanding liabilities. Can I manage my cash flows? As a CFO, my worry is how do I manage cash flows? How do I keep some of my suppliers who are critical happy? How do I make a high priority suppliers invoice go through within the stipulated SLAs, right? And finally, the process is completely decentralized is another issue where you don't have visibility, especially in a global setup. Now, a lot of them, have outsourced mailroom operations. A lot of them have it automated in some way. Maybe 40-50% of the invoices come through an EDI format, but still 57% of them still think their process is manual in nature, where invoices come through an email or whatever form. Somebody is looking at them, keying them into ERP systems like SAP, Oracle, etc. So this problem is real. While there has been a lot of automation possibilities, but still, I think the number of invoices that are processed manually through BPO companies, through shared service centers, through GICs are still a very huge number. Now, interesting statistics. What is the statistics of invoice exception rate? If you see, the best in class has 10% exceptions that they need to handle even if they have an automated process. Average is 23%. Now, how many invoices are linked to PO, right? 79-80% in a large enterprise, people are getting PO, moving into a PO based invoice, which means it's easy to match, easy to validate, easy to make the payment in an automated manner. But if you look at all of this, they are still at 32% where there are POs for an invoice, right? So that means there is some amount of human intelligence that needs to be applied to clear that invoice. That's where maybe an AI can apply. Straight through processing, you could see 49% is straight through processing in a best in class scenario. Whereas in a average or all other scenario, we have around 16 to 24% straight through processing. Electronically received, 65%. Hope this number goes up, right? Especially in our country. But you could see, I mean, and this is 2019 data, right? So it's not too far away. And if you look at cost of processing an invoice, you would be surprised. And I'm sure you would all, as finance executives who are part of the call, would be doing this exercise to see what's my cost of processing an invoice. I have to pay the vendor, but what's my cost? So surprisingly, it ranges anywhere between $12 to $2 in a global context. I'm sure in India we have better processing costs because of a low cost of labor, etc. But still, and if you see the time to process a single invoice in a best in class is around 2.9 days and 10 days in an average or other scenarios. So there is a huge potential to automate a process like this. Now, what you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel every time, right? So there is a solution that can be applied for solving this problem. Why not look at that? So if you look at an invoice processing scenario, starting from point number 1, the challenge starts from how do you source your invoice, right? Different invoices, different formats, Some come through email, some come through mail room. Some, I mean, mostly I hope there are no more fax invoices in our country, but certain scenarios you get invoices in fax. Second is indexing, to the point of, hey, where is my invoice? How does the supplier get to know what happened to my invoice? Can I give a real-time view of what the status of the invoice? Can I at least give an update on whether the invoice has been picked up? Is it scheduled to process, scheduled for payment, things like that. Third is extraction. So this is 3, 4, and 5 is where the majority of the time goes in processing an invoice. You will have different formats, quality of the invoices differ, the type of invoices differ. So the ability to identify what type of invoice is it? Is it an invoice? Is it a credit note? Is it a service invoice? Is it a PO invoice? How do you validate that automatically and extract the data from it? Then once you've extracted, you need to, sometimes you might to extract the line items, you might need to do a three-way match. You may not be necessarily, especially in large manufacturing companies, it's very hard to do a three-way match because you have a PO for X number of items, you have a GRN where they delivered a partial set of items, and then you have an invoice which comes for something else. So how do you do that three-way reconciliation? Even a human being would take 15 minutes to figure out, talk to the warehouse, talk to somewhere else, has the goods been delivered, look at GRN systems and do it. Whereas, can we apply AI to that? Can machine learning do that 15-minute job, at least crunch the numbers and bring in 2 options for the account payable rep to say, hey, yeah, these are the potential matches. This is what you need to clear as a payment. These GRNs can be closed, things like that. So that's very important from a validation standpoint. And when there are exceptions, as you saw in the last slide, there will be exception. There could be a PO mismatch. You could set thresholds maybe on the number of items where there is a mismatch. You could set percentages. After that, any exception comes, how do you route it to different people in the organization to approve and review? So there is a BPM capability required here. And then finally posting it into ERP. It could be through an API into an ERP. It could be through an RPA route, right? Rather than doing this manually into an ERP. And finally, the supplier portal where you want to do a PO flip, start from there. You want to track the status of the payment and a communication channel between the supplier and the customer. Now, if you look at these 8 points of an invoice processing flow, right from sourcing, where you need some sort of automation, extraction, you need intelligent OCR, you need machine learning, you might need deep learning for handwritten kind of scenarios, exception management, approvals, you need some sort of workflow capabilities, validations, you need business rules to be set up. Hey, this type of invoice, what is the threshold? Do I need to do a currency conversion? Do I need to do a GST validation? Things like that. So you need a rule engine, you need an automation engine, you need an extraction engine, you need a BPM engine, and then finally an automation engine. So 5 different and then finally what is in the center is insights, analytics that you need. So it's important that when you look at a solution and you're trying to build this, it becomes very important to have something that is holistic. At the same time, it is flexible. So with that, I will quickly I'll quickly try to bring up a demo of the platform, and then go into some more areas around the same. So this is the platform. Now, just before going into the invoice processing HyperApp, let me quickly show you how the platform looks like. So this is Jiffy.ai's centralized console of all automation that you can do. And all these tiles that you see are the automation apps that we have created. So we are moving away from, so there is a lot of hype around bots. Now, bots are things to do productivity enhancement at an individual user level. It doesn't automate a role. It doesn't automate a process. Bots automate tasks. And for you to do something as complex in the finance and accounting world, whether it is invoice processing, reconciliation, bots are one way to do it, but the way to do it is build an automation app. And that's what we focus in Jiffy.ai. So today I'm going to show you an invoice processing HyperApp, but you could build apps and HyperApps for various functions. So I will log into the platform as a supplier. So now assume for a moment, this is the invoice processing HyperApp. I am a supplier, I have access to this app. Now I log into my supplier portal, which we have shown for reference purpose as this portal. And I want to post a new invoice to my customer. So I go in here, I want to select an attachment, I go select an attachment, open it, right? It is in PDF, it could be a scanned image, any of that, whichever way it is, right? I could see the invoice that I'm going to post. Now, I can set this portal. Again, this is a form capability of the platform where here I've given 2 fields as mandatory. You need not make any field mandatory. You could provide additional fields. So this is allowing you to kind of move the validation to the edge to the supplier itself. As a customer, you have the ability to, do that. Now, let me just type in the invoice number here, maybe. So if you look at the actual invoice, and just let it load. You could see this is an invoice. It has got invoice number, invoice date, PO has got a slash. It's important to understand there is some line item out here, right? So different details. The devil is in the detail, right? So this is the format or this is the what do you call it, invoice number. So let me just pick it up and then say. Enter the invoice number, enter the invoice amount. So maybe let me enter an invoice amount here based on the invoice 6545 maybe. Type of invoice. This is a PO based invoice. I get to select it. Reference PO, right? I mean, what happens is when as a supplier, I get access to my POs that are active in the system automatically. So if you see for this particular invoice, this is the PO. Now I've given an invoice amount which is greater than the PO amount, and I'm trying to submit the invoice. Now you could see it automatically gave an error message saying invoice amount cannot be greater than the balance in the PO. So it is a real-time validation even before supplier submits the invoice. Many times you may not have the luxury of doing this, but if you enable a supplier portal, a lot of validations and corrections that your team needs to do is automatically avoided. Right now, I give the correct amount and I submit the invoice. Now, this is what as a supplier I do. I also have the ability to see other things in my platform. As a supplier, I could see what's my communication board. Right? Are there any queries? Right now, I don't have queries. I can raise a query, etc. Right now, that's as a supplier. Now I log out from this and I will log in as a person in the accounts payable team, say, who has access to all the invoices, right? So I log in as John Smith. Right now, if I log in as John Smith, what I would see is what are the invoices that are in my processing queue. I would see what are the operational summary invoices that are what are all the total invoices that have come in. What is the status of these invoices, etc. Right? These are all old invoices. Now, for the invoice that I submitted right now, because John Smith doesn't have access, I am logged in as the admin who has access to all invoices. Oops. I think I misplaced my password. So let me do one thing. Let me log in as John Smith itself. Now, as John Smith, I will have the ability to see what all invoices came in, what are in my queue, what are my extraction dashboards. But more importantly, if I have a new supplier who is coming in, I have the ability to decide what are all the processing rules that I need to apply. So if you see, I could say these are all the types of invoices that I need to process. These are all the transformation rules that I can apply. For example, the field data correction, I want to do a custom calculation, I can do a tax derivation, right? And these rules can be easily configured, right? How do you transform the incoming data? The next one is how do you validate the data, right? Do I need to do an SAP PO validation? Do I want to do a currency validation? Do I want to do a vendor validation? Duplicate check, quantity mismatch, all of those rules you can turn on and turn off depending on the type of invoice that you are processing. And then finally, an assignment rule. So you want to say that, hey, assign this invoice to this particular agent if the amount is greater than, and it is from a certain type of supplier or a supplier group. So these rules can be very easily set up. If I want to add a new rule, I can say, hey, if it is an IP domestic invoice, then assign it to John Smith, right? And what is the assignment criteria, right? This is the assignment criteria where I can say that if it's a barcode based invoice, barcode is there or not there, equal to, in, things like that, right? So easily you could set up a configuration rule as a business user. So you're not depending on an RPA developer or an automation in developer to set up this rule for you. That is the beauty of a low-code platform, but provided in a user-friendly manner to a business user to configure these rules. And then similarly, approval workflows, I could say when to send to approval, if the supplier name is so-and-so. All these are configurable on the platform. And finally, the posting flow, where it actually posts the invoice. Now, let me go to the operational summary and see whether my invoice has come in. Now, you could see that the status of this invoice is submitted. It is still getting processed. Now, if you see the actual invoice, this is a different invoice, right? If you see this is the invoice, it will tell you where it came from. It actually came from the supplier portal. If it has come from the email, it will say it came from the email. So you have the ability to figure out what invoice came from which supplier, etc., very easily on the platform. Now, if you look at my invoice workspace and look at some of the earlier invoices that were processed, you could see this invoice got extracted, where the fields got extracted, the line items got extracted, the validations were automatically performed, which I showed you in the business rule: PO item match, item level match, GRN match, quantity match, exceptions, PO matching, queries, transformation. So it's interesting to see, because if you see, it said there was certain transformations that were performed, right? Which is a currency conversion and a field data correction. Now, if you look at this, the item code in this invoice is sitting somewhere here, right? Now, what the system has the ability using machine learning to automatically, once you train it once, to figure out that for this supplier, item code would come in this particular type, right? So it has the ability to cleanse the data. Similarly, if you look at date, invoice date, right, it automatically extracted PO number, right? It automatically, all the fields from the system, it automatically extracted. Now a user can say post the invoice, right? Then it will go and post it into an ERP system like SAP or whatever, and the posting flow will run. Now you have the ability to create additional dashboards if you want. These are all custom dashboards that you can set up. Now, if you get a new invoice format and it has not been, understood by the system using machine learning, what happens is you have a new type here. What happens in this case is, say, take this invoice. It is in a new type. It is seeing it for the first time, but if you see, it has automatically identified a bunch of fields using machine learning. Now, the only thing, if you see, even these have been identified automatically. So the system, nobody had to manually train this invoice. But what we are saying is, when it is coming from a new supplier, make sure that the machine learning has done the right job, understood it properly, and then say save and approve. Next time a similar invoice from that supplier comes, it will automatically identify. Now, for example, GRN number was not identified by the system. You could, I'm just giving a random field here. You could actually point and click and say this is the GRN number, just as an example. So you point and click, save and approve. It automatically identifies line item details. You could train it to do that, and it is done, right? So it becomes very easy to set up a new supplier, extract data, validate, review, and you could set up these functions at different level within the organization. So that is something that I wanted to show, where an invoice comes in, it comes for approval, it comes for training if required, and it gets posted into the system. So we are looking at around 85 to 90% straight through processing in cases where there is no exception, business exceptions, etc. You can see I posted that invoice earlier. Now it is automatically opened SAP, right? It just popped up on my screen and it is posting, looking for that invoice, looking at that line items, and then if it matches, it will post it. So that's in this case, we are using RPA to post it into SAP. If we have APIs for a BAPI interface available, that would be our preferred mode, because you don't need to go through a screen automation kind of scenario, and that's much more faster to use APIs and BAPIs. But many cases you may not get that, then you go through the screen automation. So you could see that it is actually searching based on the PO number and doing all the various processes. So so that's a quick demo of the platform. Now I'll come back to the presentation and wrap it up and open it up for any questions. So you could see that I showed you the sourcing, I showed you how the invoice details can be done, extraction, a training screen for it, all the validations, exceptions, approvals, and posting, and all this was built without writing code. It was all drag and drop based interfaces. So your different roles, a configurator, a manager, a finance executive. So basically what we are doing is empowering the business to build automations that can scale. Now, why a hyper app, right? I showed you an invoice processing hyper app. Now for you to build this on your own with low code, no code, this is what it takes. Close to 150 tasks that you need to create. Around 34 views. Every role might have 4 or 5 views, so you will get around 35 views. Roles, I showed you a few roles, right? Different roles within these finance organization, and validations and connectors and integration. So if you look at a hyper app, these things come pre-configured, right? Which means you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and every time you want to do invoice processing or a new type of format or setting it up for a new country or a new region or a new plant, it becomes very easy for you to set up using a hyper app kind of framework. And how are we doing that? Using a training flow analysis framework, a business variations through a form and workflow, and a learning flow. So now, what are the potentials other than that? We could do reconciliation, cash reconciliation, payment reconciliation, bank reconciliation, service ticketing, especially when you have requests. What's the status of my PO? What's the status of any service desk related activities you could do? Onboarding of customers, suppliers, etc. Some of the other industries, you could look at claim processing, mortgage processing, trade finance automation. All of these can be built as hyper apps using a platform like Diffie.ai. So I'll pause now and ask for any questions that you might have.
Yes, thank you so much, Krish, for sharing your insights. Audiences, do we have any questions? We'll love to take that. So as per the guidelines, you need to raise your hands and put your question to Krish.
Yeah, I saw some questions on the chat window as well. Let me just see if I can.
Okay, maybe they have put personal questions to you, Krish.
Okay.
So we have a question from Deepak, I guess.
Yeah. Hi, Krish. So continuing my last question, okay, which I spoke with Vishnu.
Yeah.
Okay. See, when I saw this screen where vendor is entering those details, like what is the invoice number and amount. Okay. Same way, are those field customizable as per company clients?
Yes, absolutely. All these forms, screens, workflows that you saw are completely customizable, and you don't need code to customize it. It's all drag and drop based interface where you can go and customize it.
Okay, so so continuing my last question, which I asked to Vishnu, the main I'm asking from SAP point of view and from capturing IRN point of view. Okay, because now SAP has also given field for capturing all the 64-digit IRN number. Okay, so I just wanted to know, would it be possible for vendors? Typing IRN number 64-digit will be very cumbersome for vendor.
Correct.
Okay, so is there any facility where as soon as it is uploaded by the vendor, okay, invoice is uploaded, it will automatically read that barcode, or it will automatically read that IRN, and it will fill those details automatically? Is it possible?
Yes. So what we can do is when this is the form capability I was talking about. So these are fields you can add, remove, and create a form. Yeah. To exactly to your point, you can very easily go and capture these details. Automatically you can put a button where it says extract, and in the backend we can run things to extract data from that invoice 64-digit, whatever be that number, and process it on the system real time.
Okay, okay, so that is possible. And second thing, is it also possible to have a see once it is approved, okay, on portal, okay, but
Mhm.
once invoice is approved by the respective person, okay, can it be linked with SAP to have the auto Miro done? Because
Yes.
auto invoice processing done, is it possible? At least in
Yes.
park stage, not in post stage. Is it
Yes,
possible?
so both the Migo and Miro process is completely automated. What I showed you in that SAP processing flow
Yeah, yeah.
is that's completely automated. So what we do is extract the data, do valid. So we'll go to SAP, fetch the PO if it is a PO based invoice, fetch the line item level details, do the three-way match if required, and then do the Migo Miro process and close it.
Acha, so Miro is also possible because the screen which I saw was of Mygo, I guess.
That's
Okay,
right. So the next step, I didn't show the whole thing. The next step would have been the Miro process.
Miro. So auto Miro is possible.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deepak, and thank you, Krish, for answering the questions. So if we have any questions, we can you can also put on the chat room. We will be taking it from there as well. Right, Krish? So
Yeah, that's
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And quickly moving to our next session, I would like to welcome Shiva Shankar Ajuturi, Director O2C P2P Robotics Volvo, to speak about him. He's an accounting professional with 20 years of experience in financial services industry across different F&A verticals in managing multi-year finance transformations, robotics, analytics, and service delivery of end-to-end accounting function. And he would be sharing an interesting case study by Volvo on successful partnership with the Jiffy.ai. So over to you, Shiva, to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekta. Hopefully, my audio is clear.
Yes, you are.
Good. I will start sharing my screen. Let me know once you see
we
the
can see your
screen.
screen.
Good. Thank you. Chris, it was an interesting session. It's difficult when I am in between lunch and you in terms of talking about digital transformation, finance, and accounting, I guess. But then that app was really interesting, Chris, and I'll also share our experiences, of course, working with Jiffy.ai and what our journey has been in general. So I would structure this in with a couple of examples. One in terms of our journey as to what has been our transformational journey, and then I'll give you a couple of examples. One where we have done it is in terms of a traditional task automation, and then the second one that I'll show you is more about how HyperApps are going to play an important role, and especially in the accounts payable space, and how rapidly this space has been changing, and how our experience has been working with both the traditional way of OCR stuff, template based automation, versus the HyperApp and the intelligent automation on accounts payable. So quickly, this is our transformational journey. Like any organization, especially in F&A, Excel sheets, macros are very close to accountants, and that's what we keep talking about in our organization as well. So you can't take out an accountant, you can't have an accountant who's not having access to Excel sheet, and then you will see him fish out of water. So that's how accountant and Excel sheets are in general. Ours is no different. When we look back 10 years back in our journey, in the initial part of it, when our global business services or shared services have started, we were also doing, like any other organization, automation through Excel based and access based automations. Slowly, we moved on to leveraging macros, .NET applications, a bit more complex MS Access front-end forms and stuff like that. But then the real journey started in terms of our engagement with option 3 or Jiffy.ai and our robotics journey as such in the organization. So we've done our first pilot in 2016, and I'll talk about the first pilot and how we have done that in my example, because your first one is always very close to your heart, and then there's got a lot of mileage in the system as such. So that's something that I'll talk about, the pilot that we have done in 2016. But then after that, once we have finished our pilot and we have executed our pilot, we have never looked back. What we have actually done is we moved on, did a lot more in this space in terms of automations. And now what we are looking at it in 2020 and 2021 and beyond is more about not just focusing on the task automation. I'm sorry, am I audible, or is there any?
Yes, you are. Uh,
I could hear a lot of echo
yeah,
coming.
requesting everybody to please be on mute when the speakers are taking the session. Requesting everyone. Thank you.
Okay, so that, and after the pilot, how we have moved forward and how 2021 and beyond, how we are looking at in terms of our perspective, in terms of how automation should be, and what should be our focus areas in terms of straight through processing, not just a specific task automation, but looking at as a service models, how can you kind of change the game with a lot more digital on the go kind of an environment that finance demands is our focus, and I'll talk about those examples as well. So that's been our journey from Excel macros, complex Excel spreadsheets, to traditional automation, to HyperApp based automations and pointed solutions as such, is our journey in the last 10 years. With that, what I'll talk about is a very first robotic process automation that we have done in our organization is predominantly about journal voucher. I'll not talk about the process because everybody knows the journal voucher automation process as such. But then what is important here is in terms of the process challenge. We are a global shared services, and then the requirement is that the journals that come to this global shared services have to be processed at a very specific timeline and a pace. And when we're talking about timeline and a pace during the month ends, the demand in terms of the journals getting into the system is so critical that people were looking at, after the journal comes into the global shared services, that needs to be processed in a span of about an hour or so. And if the journal is not processed, then the overall closing process would get delayed, and we don't want to get delayed. And that 1 hour is in itself is a big challenge, because most of these people want to have these journals posted and immediately see the impact of it. So it was difficult for us to get this process into global shared services and convince them that this is a way how we can get. Of course, cost arbitrage is one of those important things when you move process into global shared services, but then the efficiency and the speed of processing. We were not able to meet those challenges, especially during the closing days, where we used to handle roughly about 6,000 plus invoice plus journal entries during the close dates, especially during your close day 1 and close day 2, day 1, day 2, or work day 1, work day 2, whichever way hope you call it. So that was our challenge. So what we did was we looked back and then said, okay, is there a way that we can do this? Scripting, macro based stuff was possible in SAP, but from time to time, what you get to see is surprises in SAP is about these messages that you come up, the screens that pop up depending on your GL master data configurations and things like that. So it was not so easy to do it for us using macros. We were able to do it at the start with macros, but then the efficiency was not that great. What we did then, we worked with Gphy.ai, and then we've created a traditional bot-based process to make sure that the requests, once you receive it, they get picked up, they get processed, they go into SAP, the validations are done, they go into SAP, then after the processing is done, very importantly for our compliance requirements, you need to get the supportings attached in SAP and send it for the approvers, for them to approve it. What is important is this has been our process manually, and we are able to do it through the robotic process as such with this process, but then the biggest advantage is now we are able to digitally look through these transactions before they go into SAP and visualize these transactions in terms of from where, how many journals are coming, at what point of time these journals are coming, what values these journals are. We were able to visualize all these metrics in our dashboards, real-time dashboards that are displayed on the floor, and then people were able to immediately react in terms of the way how the numbers are moving in terms of the process. That's something that we were able to achieve this through. From an earlier SLA of 1 hour that we have agreed with our business stakeholders, we were only able to do it to an extent of 60-65% when we were doing it manually. So 60% or 35 to 40% of our journals that are coming through are not getting processed within 1 hour. That is leading to a lot of frustrations in the business areas. With robotics and automation, the maximum turnaround time that we have observed is about 5 minutes after an invoice, after a journal comes into your system, and to the time it gets processed in the system. Especially on the business days, it was really appreciated by the business that they could see the numbers. They were not seeing the efficiency game. They were seeing how my journal, when it goes into the system, how fast can I see it, how fast should I be making my adjustments into this, and how fast should I be reporting back to the management in terms of my consolidated numbers for those legal entities. That was the case that we have kind of talked about in terms of our journal watcher automation, and we were able to achieve this. One very important thing here is in terms of efficiency. We were staffing, and people who are in the accounting background would understand that in any record to report kind of an operations, you generally staff to the peak volumes and peak days. It is predominantly on the closing days. We were having 15 odd full-time employees working on this journal process during the closing days, and these people were not completely leveraged on this. There are tasks that we were able to leverage it, but then what we did is after this robotic process, we were able to redeploy these people into a lot more analytical based activities during the closing process rather than punching or getting these journals into the system. And that's been the success story on this. This was very early in 2016, the very first process that we were automating it. What has this given to us as an organization is it given us a lot of impetus to our automation journey, not just within the global business services or global shared services. It has given a lot of confidence to the business because they seeing that the problem that we were not able to solve through other traditional means of staffing and other things, we were able to solve it through technology, and that they have seen the accuracy levels going tremendously high in terms of the way how this process was done. And that is how we were able to convince businesses and fund this journey of digitization and transformation in the finance and accounting processes. That's my first case study. I see that there is one question that has come in. Is it a question to?
Is it on your personal, Shiva?
No, I could see that Mr. Ramesh Joshi, DGM Finance. Okay, he's asking. Yeah, I think to me direct message.
Yes, that's a personal question on your personal chat. So you can take it after your session, no worries.
Okay, good, thank you. I am new to Zoom, so we use other platforms, so not sure of the Zoom messages as such. So bear with me. Yes.
No
Okay, the next one is more in line with what Chris was talking about. This is very important in terms of how we look at the journey as well. When we are talking about best-in-class process and accounts payable, it is not about processing through OCRs or through AI-based applications. Everybody in the industry would want to talk about EDIs. Everybody in the industry wants to talk about e-invoicing to the extent where you have completely touchless flows. A world would be ideal if that was the reality in terms of 100% of our invoices that comes through. But what we see as an organization, being the global organization that we are and the scale of invoice, I'm talking about invoices to the extent of 7 to 8 million invoices per annum that we kind of talk about. our penetration levels to the in terms of our electronic invoicing coverage is about 60%. So we are talking about our 35 to 40 odd percentage of invoices still have to go through this process of manual in registration as such, and that's where the most of your human capital or intervention goes into in terms of getting these invoices. And the cycle time in terms of complete end-to-end processing from receipt of your invoices into your environment or organization to the time the invoice is ready for payment. Payment again depends on schedules and a lot of other factors. So what we see is from the time the invoice comes into the time the invoice is ready for payment, after matching approvals and all these things happen, is where the actual game is in terms of one, registration, two, a lot of times you have hidden efforts in terms of error handling is what we call the effort that goes into telling people that they have to do their job in the organization about matching, getting the GRs done, getting the invoices matched for quantity price, or if it is not a PO based invoice, then getting these invoices coded and approved so that they pass through the channel. This is this effort which takes a huge amount of effort in terms of error handling. One, of course, there is the effort in terms of manually punching these invoices in the system. So this 40% is something that we couldn't get away with because of the nature of the business that we are in. But this is largely true in my experience of 20 years in this industry in terms of how this portion of 20% or 30% odd will become an irritant in terms of how the effort goes into the system in terms of the cost of processing invoices. So what we did was, like everybody, about 3.5 years back, we were using template based RPA that we have developed. We have used it, it was fantastic. But then from time to time, these invoices, when they are template based, any changes on the template would get as a fallout in terms of our environment. So that doesn't help in terms of straight through processing. So we were to start with, we've achieved a high of about 60%. But then over a period of time, gradually, when you have new suppliers coming on board, the formats change, a lot of things happen into your business in a span of 2 to 4 years. The throughput has come down to about 40-45 odd percentage. What we've learned over time is that templates are good, but they're probably not solving the case that we would want to solve. That's when we've got this into this HyperApp based, more end-to-end solution that can actually give you, without too much of intervention from our employees. It is technically easy and light to maintain is also one of the very important criteria that we have considered. And we would want the entire value chain and entire process and the value that we can derive out of in terms of one solution, which is out of the box, all the features that are available, but still customizable to our needs is what we were looking at. There are a lot of solutions in the market. You can go to a solution A, to a solution B, anything. But then what we would want to see is how easily can I customize a solution that is there, which has end-to-end capabilities to my needs, with minimalistic coding that is possible, or absolutely no coding, with functional guys being able to configure the system. And that is how we've got into this HyperApp based solution on accounts payable. We've taken that, we've looked at configuration, then we've looked at how the machine learning ability and transformations works. More importantly, how our business users can configure important checks and balances in the overall processing of the invoicing, and how easy can we maintain and onboard new suppliers. That was things that we've looked at and configured. We've used it, like I said, from a manual to process to a traditional OCR based, template based automation. On invoicing, we moved on to a HyperApp based automation, and then you see some of those numbers that I've represented there in the slide, the benefits that we have been able to achieve it. See this number at the bottom of your screen at 80-85%, they keep varying in terms of how your system gets adopted to new processes and stuff like that. I would say anything that takes from high 70s to good 90s in terms of straight through touchless processing would be a fantastic achievement on AI ML based invoice processing solutions. What is important for us is the touch points with the suppliers at the start and at the end. And I was witnessing this app that Chris you're showing, and that customer portal for us has been, or the supplier portal has been something which is really helpful, because most often than not, because we are a global company, then we have a scanning center, we don't receive everything through what we call digital invoicing and stuff like that. We needed a quicker channel for our suppliers to submit invoices. And how could we enable that? That was a game changer in terms of receiving invoices faster, which means you're taking about 2 to 4 days of time at the start of the process of receiving invoices, which means those 2 to 4 days, I probably will process an invoice and match it and make it ready for payment. To about 70-80% of the invoices would probably get matched and then go through it very quickly, easily, which means that time it takes for me to complete the entire cycle on invoicing would be very fast. Second thing is, you avoid a lot of effort on your contact center business, help desk, supplier query business, because supplier who's submitting your invoices on the portal can actually come back and see the status of the invoice, and that is not something that you would have as a delay in terms of the information, but it is a real-time information that a supplier can see, come back to the place where he's submitting invoices, see his invoices status, and if there is a requirement, you can even query that based on specific, objectively giving you very specific information on which invoice he has a query on. And this can also be addressed and what you call answered by a process that you can set up in terms of integrations with your ERPs to answer the suppliers in an automated way, which means you take out the effort of the entire supplier query management process to a large extent, move your digital invoices other than the e-invoices to a touchless flows. If there is any error handling, you talk about 50 to 60% reduction in the error handling in terms of how you manage those invoices and get them ready for payment. That is what our experience has been on this HyperApp based automation. And what we see for the future of F&A automation as such is that it needs to be something that we should be empowering and enabling our teams to kind of work towards more of digitally enabled app-based processing or app-based creation, automations that we would want, and we want them to visualize these this process in a way that the metrics and insights that it can generate are useful for you to look at which areas of your process you need to attack and reduce the or add value to the business in terms of giving those insights. More and more world is moving towards especially on the interaction based processor and this thing, self-service capabilities are very important in terms of anything, whether it is accounts payable, whether it is accounts receivable, or internal stakeholder interactions in terms of GL closing process. Wherever possible, self-service, customizable business rules process are important, and once they are enabled, you have lot of data that you can read through, analyze, and generate insights on. What this would do is also help you to manage the workforce and the workload of the workforce. By doing these two, what you can actually do is you can actually digitize and put a lot of things of these analysis and information, a lot of your workflow process in terms of digitally enabled on the go devices, and you can kind of make sure them and shift the focus of people from task based automation and looking at, okay, I'm saving 4 hours here to 8 hours there on this day to that day, to how much of my process are actually going through touchless flows, whether it is invoice processing or whether it is generating value for the journal or posting the journal or sending information to my customers through reminders to my customers or invoices to my customers or statement of accounts to my customers, to a large extent providing information to the auditors at the end of the year as well through self-service capabilities and automated routes. That's how we look at our future and future of F&A and automation as such in terms of digitization journey. With this, I stop here with my presentation, and then happy to take any questions if you guys have.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Shiva, for sharing your insights and your success story. So, do we have any questions, audience? As per the guidelines, you need to raise your hands and put your concern question, and Shiva will take it from there. Okay, we again have a question from Ramesh. So no problem, Ramesh. You don't get an option, but still you can put your question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ramesh from TVST. I'm sure this was very nice.
You are not clear, Ramesh.
Ramesh, you what?
Am I clear now?
No, Ramesh.
Am I clear now?
Yes.
Better.
Yeah. So my question is like, in this automation of bill processing, is it necessary to have a PO? Because as you know, Krish also told earlier, there is issue that all the purchase orders are not.
Okay, Ramesh, there is absolutely no need for you to have a PO as a mandatory requirement for process to be automated. We don't see it that way. Generally, in the app-based process also, it depends on your business and business needs, and you can actually do this automation without a PO as well, because one of those things that are available now in these apps are about how intelligently you can do coding of these invoices and then route them through a workflow based approval process that still will give you a lot of compliance and being able to process these invoices through an automated route.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Ramesh. Okay.
I think we have lost it.
Yes. So thank you, Shiva, for being here and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Quickly, yeah. So quickly moving to our panel discussion. Now I would like to invite Sangeeta Falgunin, VP Sales and Alliances, APAC Jiffy.ai, to take over and introduce the panel. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, just give me a minute. Yeah, so we have a very awesome panel today, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Debdutt Mishra, who's the advisory board for vSOR.ai. I've known Debu for a while. So Debu is a leadership and innovations consultant who actually works with founders and leaders to create a lasting legacy. He brings over 3 decades of experience and has worked with companies like PwC, Arthur Andersen, Hewitt, Hay Group, and Deloitte. We also will have Shubhra Gaurisaria, who is the GM Home Care for Unilever. Shubhra is a rank holder, a CA with about 17 years of experience across FMCG, oil and gas sectors. She's got a lot of experience working on business partnering, forecasting, accounting, supply chain, finance, joint ventures audit, actually a gold medal in accounting, an Olympiad contest, a test of accounting and controls across Unilever countries. She's currently leading the home care business, and which is around 2 euro billion in size, and is taking care of profitability management and financial decisions as part of the Hindustan Unilever leadership team. We also have G. Gopinathan, who's the global immense extension officer for Lupin Limited, with about 20 years of experience, primarily in, with Reckitt and Beckinsale. Prior to that, he was associated with Philips, Procter & Gamble, ISRO, ABB, etc. So Mr. Gopinathan holds a master's degree in business administration and is from the University of Edinburgh, UK, and a BTech from University of Kerala. We'll have Sudesh Shashidharan, who's from product consulting at Jiffy.ai. So Sudesh has been, again, lots of experience on the operations floor, is a consultant, solutions consultant as part of the automation consulting team at Panini, which is Jiffy. He's been advising organizations as to how to implement a successful automation program, 3 years plus with Panini and other competitive products. Prior to that, he's been an automation consultant, has held senior operations roles in financial services companies like Goldman Sachs, HIS Market, Thomson Reuters, etc. We will also have Mr. Logesh Veluswamy, who is the founder and CEO for FETrack. So Logesh is a founder CEO for FETrack, which is a Coimbatore-based startup offering an affordable end-to-end intuitive business processing SaaS solution that simplifies and eases the operations for small and medium businesses across a wide variety of industries from manufacturing to retail. So I let this very august panel now get into a discussion and brainstorm a bit around how the solution that we have in FNA, how it's going to look in the real world, and some of the challenges and where we can possibly see this as a future. Debu, who will be leading, who will be moderating the session. Debu, Shriji has a hard cutoff at 1:30, so I'll leave that with you to take it.
Sure. Thanks, Sangeeta.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind. So hi everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion. And as Sangeeta pointed out, we have some really stellar lineup of professionals. And what I wanted to do is, start off with laying. So you've been tuning into the conversation so far. So what I wanted to do was start off laying a kind of a basics of RPA and the potential it holds. So we will start with that, and then I'll ask the panelists to share their vision and perspectives about the future, and also some of the interesting challenges around, the hard to automate challenges that organizations face. So we will discuss that and wrap up. So we'll keep it fast and pacey, and focus on things that would be interesting for us to take away. And while I was listening to the presentation prior to this, I got reminded that most of us probably have tools of automation in our pockets, which we don't use. But the power of that is really fabulous. So if you're an Android user, then if you look at if this, then that as an app, those are simple automations or shortcuts on Apple iOS mobile devices. But RPA is way beyond that. It's not about doing simple tasks and automating it. It is about building intelligence and bringing far superior business outcomes, and that's the experience or insight that I have as a consultant. But what I would like to do is invite Sudesh to give us all a bird's eye view about RPA and how it has evolved, and also tell us a bit about HyperApps. So Sudesh, if you could just take a couple of minutes to give a layman's overview about RPA and how it has evolved, and also what HyperApps are and what potential they hold, that would be awesome. Over to you, Sudesh.
Sure. Thank you. I hope I'm audible. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Deva. It's actually quite interesting that, what, Siva was talking about, right, in terms of, how the value realization needs of the organization grew, once they started on with the automation program. So, and I feel that the journey that RPA or the evolution of RPA has been very consistent with the way the evolution story that Siva really described, right? So, at a very basic level, RPA or robotic process automation is a software, right, that allows users to create software robots or bots that can learn, mimic, and then execute rules-based business process automation. Now, the reason why RPA really came into existence and had a pretty high adoption rate within the organizations is because it is non-invasive. That is, it does not require any fundamental changes to the underlying applications. It would interact with the business application at the UI layer like humans would. It would perform repetitive and mundane process activities, however, with much higher accuracy, speed, and while being available 24/7, as we know that the bots really don't get tired, so they work well. Now, when an organization truly embarks on the automation journey, it sets up a strategic view on what the key success criteria are, some of which being improved customer experience. That is, you want your organization to be faster. You want to reduce your processing time from days to minutes while retaining or improving the quality of service. You want the solution to be flexible. It needs to be scalable. It should allow our operations to operate 24/7, and it should be able to scale up and down with demand. It should increase savings and productivity, and at the same time, it should be able to generate some distinctive insights that allows you to predict and improve drivers of performance within the operations. So while RPA helped, more and more, it started to sink in within organizations that it tackles only a part of the problem, right? So RPA alone only addresses, what we call as the low-hanging fruits or processes which are very well defined, are very structured, and have very few exceptions, right? And we all know that it's not a very common scenario in the operations world. So RPA helped in addressing automation needs of what we call as low-hanging fruits. Now, in order to realize true ROI, the automation strategy really needed to focus on the role of the operations individuals, right, and not really the activities that they perform, which meant the automation needed to focus on the end-to-end process and not the tasks alone. So hence the need to look at what is possible beyond just RPA and see it as one of the key ingredients within the broader automation spectrum. So for end-to-end automation, some of the key challenges that needed to be addressed were how do we better manage the complexity associated with handling of data in its various forms. Like Siva mentioned, you have vendors, who have tons of formats, the way data is presented keeps changing, right? Now, how do we accelerate transformation? By bringing humans and software robots closer. That is, how do we enable continuous learning within the program? How do we improve the decision-making which humans are responsible for? How do we handle exceptions that are generated by RPA? And how do we build meaningful insights that really helps operations as a whole? So one of the solutions, that came through as a need for, looking at better strategies was look at ways in which, we can stitch together some of the core technologies that addresses these challenges in silos, right? Such as, application of AI or machine learning that helps replicate cognitive skills of human beings, being able to handle complex data. Data analytics that helps build business insights and fosters better decision-making, and workflow capabilities that bring in better controls in the process and helps with the interaction between the key contributors of the process, whether it be applications that are used, whether it be standard operating procedures, whether it be people and the bots, right? Now, the problem with stitching these mutually complementary, however exclusive capabilities was that they operated in silos, which meant that it added on to a bigger admin nightmare for center of excellence teams wherever they exist, of course, and they were much costly to manage, right, in terms of licensing, the capabilities that needed of people who needed to drive these individual technologies, and hence scalability became a huge challenge. Now, the hyperautomation as the new evolution of automation journey, as we understand, solves these challenges by bringing these core capabilities together, which is the RPA, AI, ML, analytics, and workflow together into a fully integrated, unified platform approach. Now, which means that it brings in flexibility because hyperautomation relies on multitude of automation technologies, the ones that we spoke about. The organizations can now move past the limited benefits of a single digital technology, which was RPA. And it is designed for scalability. It brings a better governance because it's more centrally managed. The cost is managed better because now you're looking at like not scattered multiple licenses, but and also you're looking at core competencies of the people that can manage this one single application, and hence it's a lot easier to manage from a core competency perspective from a people side. Now, HyperApps takes this design approach of hyper automation a notch further. What it does is that it combines the industry experience into within the specific verticals, and translate that into vertical specific solutions, right? So what it basically does is that it not only combines all the core technologies that are required in order to onboard the automation, it dramatically reduces the time that is required to onboard automation solution within operations, as they come with pre-built data models, highly configurable business rule components, reduces the maintenance effort, reduces the dependency on the core technology groups, because now the operations team can manage some of these changes that are needed required, and also can fit into a SaaS model like offering. Right? So it basically means that it allows for adoption of the technology from an automation standpoint more meaningful and much easier. So,
great. So what I love about the fact is that the sharp contrast between RPA and hyper automation, and that's a great segue for me to request Sriji Gopinathan, Global CIO Lupin, to share his perspective. So Sriji, you've been at the forefront of looking at automation and what it holds for a global enterprise like Lupin. I would want to, for the audience and those listening in, want your view around why is RPA important? So your perspective on why is RPA important? And according to you, if there were no constraints world feasible, what is your vision of RPA and HyperApps in the future? So if you could share your perspective, why is it important? And if no constraints world is feasible, what is your vision of RPA in the future? Over to you,
Thanks,
Sriji.
thanks, Thibaut. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question, and thanks for having me here. I think the question is not really whether RPA is important or not. I think we are now at a situation where automation of various kinds has become very, very important. In the past, I think we've been equating automation as in implementation of ERP or some lab systems or some invoice scanning systems. I mean, those were one level of digitization, so to say. Now, I think we are at a phase where the technology which is available for RPA or for any other technologies that needs to work around that, whether it is ML or AI or NLP or document processing, it has matured. It has reached a situation where it has started delivering real results, not just in terms of productivity, but in terms of going and doing things which was impossible to think of in the past. So there have been, in our case, for example, there is a case where a pricing related computation needs to be done based on certain fiscal parameters that comes out from the tax authorities and the government. It is so complex, we used to probably do once a year. Whereas, this regulations and the parameters used to get updated on a much more frequent manner. Now, just because of the sheer volume of work involved there, we just couldn't do more than once a year. So you can see it is not just a productivity improvement. If we can do that kind of activity on a much more higher frequency, we are not just being more compliant, but actually we are leveraging the things like pricing to the advantage of the organization in many different ways. So it can actually result in business benefits for the organization as well. So RPA, if we talk about it, it has reached a level where it can actually deliver results to the bottom line, and in some cases potentially to the top line as well. Now we have currently in this session focusing on finance, but actually it is not just for finance. It is there. If I look at my manufacturing setup, and if I look at how we run our HPLCs for our lab or for my production lines, the way that I can use RPA to go and influence how that process runs is significant. Similarly, if I look at my core activities within finance, then there's a bunch of things that we have gone after, and it could be payments related, it could be GL reconciliation related, it could be accruals related, GST reconciliation, AUC follow-ups, capitalization and disposals. I mean, it's like a series of use cases that we have gone after, and it is not theory anymore. It is real results that is being delivered, and hence there is a pull from my business stakeholders to do more and more. So that is that shows the success and maturity of a particular technology. The moment the business stakeholders realize, actually, this is doing good for me, and this is not just a technology being thrust on me, that shows that the maturity has gone to another level altogether. Now, you talked about the HyperApps as well. I mean, we all know RPA is rule-based, and hence it has its own limitations. I think Shiva in his previous session talked about when the templates change, you need to go back and change everything, right? So HyperApps, you leveraging the more fussier technology, right? Like machine learning, brings in that kind of capability into these scenarios where even if there are changes on the templates or the data, the models and the algorithms that has been put in place learns to deal with in a cleverer way. Okay, will there be still exceptions where there is a human in the loop that is needed? Potentially, yes, during the early phases of the learnings especially. But once that learning happens couple of loops, then it becomes self-sufficient to a great extent. And hence it is very, very important to look at RPA not just in isolation. It has to be a hand-in-hand approach with these other technologies and the apps that we are talking about. If I don't do that, the efficacy of the automation drops as we go, because we are not automating a static scenario. It is a dynamic scenario, whether it is a finance, whether it is any other function that we are talking about. It is going to be dynamic. We can, as IT professional, we can always keep crying about user requirements changing and everything else, but that's reality, right? I mean, we have to learn to deal with it, and that's where this kind of technologies come in. I think that's why it is really important.
Thanks, Srijik. I like that whole idea of that. The evolution of technologies that have come into play has moved it beyond just being rules-based to go hand in hand with bringing humans into the loop. So I'll come back to you with a question which got triggered by that statement of yours, which is that, do you see a kind of a future where nudges or, behavioral science or neuroscience-led nudges could also start playing a role in hyper-automation, because it could provide prescriptive actions to people so that they have a choice set to look from. So I'll come back to you with that. I wanted to move on to, ask Shubhra, given her experience, to share what are the challenges you think automation faces in organizations, and what's generally been your perspective about how to go about dealing with those? Why is it critical, and what are those challenges, and how does one go about dealing with those? Shubhra, over to you.
Thanks, Devu. Thanks for having me as a panel member. I'm quite actually privileged to have a very esteemed panelist who have worked on robotics. So I have been more as a consumer of RPA, and from my perspective, if I may talk about what has been the challenges and what are the learnings which come through. I think for any RPA, it has to strike a fine balance between value delivered, and I think during the course of the session, we have spoken a lot about value, and how do you actually bring about the risk involved. And by risk, I mean whether it's a risk in terms of people, in terms of processes and controls. And Shriji touched upon it in a bit, that how do you ensure that the processes and the RPA is not static, but it keeps evolving depending on the needs of the consumer. So Of course, none of us can probably belittle the fact that it has to be thorough design, which helps in actually ensuring that's more of a sprint approach rather than a complete design that we have done at one go, and it keeps evolving itself, and having a right pilot, which assimilates the learnings, because quite often than not, we have realized that if you don't spend a lot of time in actually looking at the as-is process and design the to-be process of RPA, it might lead to a situation of garbage in and garbage out. Hence, how do you actually probably re-engineer your current process and then design your bot for it? Bot implementation, in my understanding, is quite expensive. And hence, how do you look at prioritizing value over volume? That how do you ensure that the value unlocked is higher than the volume of transactions? Because quite often than not, we get lured by the volume of transactions being processed, whereas I think we should prioritize more on value. Third factor which I want to talk about is, I think where many organizations slip is governance. If you have various departments and users working in silos on bots, there's a huge risk of multiple bots being designed. And in that case, how do you ensure there's a COE or a central organization which looks at interfaces between various bots so that they can design a system which is far more holistic? Fourth one, as a finance user, again, something that which I realized is over a period of time, there's a huge risk of us losing intimacy to processes once the bot takes over. And we have seen it quite often during SAP implementation as well, where a lot of us who have probably done their jobs post SAP have lost touch with posting journal entries, doing trial balance repo. So how do you ensure that the documentation is robust and at time to time we review the processes so that it doesn't become like a where humans completely lose touch and we leave it to machines and their controls and issues which crop up. And hence for me, it's about how do you define the right process, measure it, analyze the end-to-end process before implement, and then build robust controls to ensure that it leaves behind a strong audit trail and we don't bust the controls in the quest of automation and efficiencies. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Shubhra. So, and that was an interesting perspective from a user's point of view, which again fits in brilliantly with me asking Logesh to step in and share his perspective. So, Logesh, you are doing something very interesting. You have a large pool of users who are paying you for services to provide them with automation, which they wouldn't have access to. So could you provide us with a perspective of where do you see automation and hyper automation going from here, and what it holds for SMEs, particularly from your perspective?
Sure, Debo. First of all, thank you for having me here. As Sriji and Shubhra were mentioning, the need of RPA is inevitable even for an SME, right? So for SME, the critical is like time, resource, and money. So they'll have to make sure that they're replacing it properly for the growth. So for that to happen, RPA and HyperApps cannot be ignored. But the fact that the cost of ownership is very high when it comes to RPA and HyperApps. As Shubhra was mentioning, the return on investment, all that stuff may not work out because of the less volume, right? So what we're trying to do, or what the vision we have is we want to set up an center of excellence for the SMEs where they can use the services on a SaaS model. They can still they have the access to the HyperApps and apps without compromising on the security and privacy policies, and automate these transactions and get benefited out of it. So that's where we're moving towards. So for us, an RPA and HyperApps will help our SMEs speed up the process, improve the quality, make the data clean, and act on the data. In today's world, 80% of the SME owners capture data just for compliances. They don't use the data because this data, the availability of the data is at a very later stage. They don't get it on time for them to use it. So speed plays a key role, and secondly, access to resources, right? So it's not that SMEs don't have resources to automate all this, and again error prone. As Chris was mentioning, 40 to 50% of the transactions get into an error because of the manual intervention. So the vision of HyperApps with Jiffy is to automate this and give them a solution which is affordable to them to speed up the process, improve the quality and data.
And you mentioned the, you mentioned error. Is there a kind of and this is a question I would hold for all the panelists, Sriji, Shubhra, Sudesh as well, that is there a kind of an estimate for the cost of error that, which processes carry with them, which is definitely a kind of an ROI, which Shubhra was mentioning, is an ROI for hyper automation and RPA as well. Because time saving, yes, definitely, but the cost of error, if anybody can share a perspective, Sriji, would you like to go ahead on that?
Yeah, so I think this is why it is very important, as Shubhra also mentioned earlier, that quality of execution of the automation is not negotiable, right? And there has to be a very, very strong way of reconciling and also exception handling. So we do have a scenario where there is a bot which actually goes to the government websites and gets information about our vendors, in other cases, exchange rates and all those things. So, and this data goes directly into our ERP for subsequent calculations. Okay, if there is an error, you're basically screwed. Yeah, so there is, this is having very, very high impact. So there is no room for error in that, and hence we do this step by step. We don't go for 100% direct pushing in these numbers into the calculation logics. We do run months of evaluation based on validations that we do. And we also keep track of any, because the source of the information also sometimes changes. When you go for external sources and get this data, there is no guarantee that the source data is coming in exactly the same format or the way that you wanted it when you automated it. So there is also a need for reconciling that the source information which is getting into that calculation logic is indeed correct as well. So there are multiple points in the value chain of this process where it is absolutely essential for you to have checks and measures. And if any of those checks and measures is throwing out an exception, the end-to-end automation stops. There is an intervention, there is a check before it passes through to the next stage. So yeah, I mean, cost of error can be quite expensive.
Thanks, Vijay. I wanted to quickly just open it up to the folks who are listening in. If there are any questions you would like to pose to the panelists, just raise your hand or type it into the chat window, and we will, I will use that to ask the esteemed panelists to respond to it. In the meanwhile, while you are thinking of questions that you would like to ask the panelists, don't ask me questions. I'm the moderator and I'm not the expert in this area. I wanted to move on to the next, question which I had in mind. And Sriji, I know that you have a hard stop at 1:30, so I'll come back to you first.
I can extend it by 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So your views as to why is RPA interesting? And I'm actually taking a leaf of something that you told me a couple of days ago. What are those hard to automate things which you think makes RPA or hyper automation so interesting? Your views on how to automate stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, this is again coming back to the structured versus unstructured data, right? So we are looking at a case actually along with Jiffy about payroll related income tax filing scenarios. So there's a lot of data that goes into that computation, which can be home loan related and a lot of other things. Okay, so there is unstructured data that comes into this process. There are sometimes interesting things like watermarks on the paper, which is something that we are working with on now. All these brings in complexities which are not so easy to automate. you know, as you can imagine, you're dealing with every employee in the company who has an income tax filing to be done. There are multiple inputs that will come from them in terms of their investments and loans and whatnot. So the scope of the documents that is going to come in is also actually not finite, and it is going to be different from case to case, and it is going to be different from employee to employee as well, potentially from year on year. So the variability of the input data that goes into this kind of automation is making it very hard to automate. But the volume of work involved in this is quite high, and it is you know, if we can automate that, there is a chance that a certain percentage, and potentially a good certain percentage of that, can actually go through, and then the team which traditionally used to do this completely manually need to focus on the remaining ones. So this is one example that I'm talking about. Another example could be if I go and look at my manufacturing sites. Not all source of data that comes in is digitized. Yeah, so there's a lot of data logging that happens by operators on the line for the utilities, etc., on different templates. It can be on a tab using the e-log solution that we have. It can be on a piece of paper that is getting printed from site to site, from line to line. Again, there is a lot of variability on this. Now, if I want to go and look at predictive maintenance type of scenarios, or improving the yield of the line type of scenario, or whatever we are talking about in manufacturing, all this data becomes very important. You know, if you think about the utility consumption, some of our API plants, active pharmaceutical ingredient plants, is one of the highest cost components from those sites. So if we can reduce some of those by managing the consumption, it's going to really bring a significant impact on the cost of operations for that site. And there is a lot of unstructured data. So these are the scenarios, a couple of examples, there's a lot more, where it becomes very, very hard to automate. And that's where I'm trying to take initial steps, baby steps as of now, try to learn what is it that we can do, and what kind of impact that we can bring, how much can we automate. And it's not easy. So this is a journey that we're going to go through. We will see how much we'll succeed. Yeah.
I love the income tax use case that you talked about, and personally, as an individual, I know how cumbersome it is, and when you're doing it at scale for thousands of people, it just becomes unmanageable. And I know Logesh is smiling because he's probably seeing a potential platform that he can launch for individuals to solve this problem. So Logesh, coming to you, what are the hard to automate things that your customers would love to be addressed by hyper automation or RPA?
So, Debo, as I mentioned,
Logesh, you have to be a bit louder. Your audio is
now?
not. Yeah, now it's much better. Much better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. See, as I mentioned, so the SMEs volumes are less, and companies like bookkeeping companies, where they do this activities for thousands of businesses. Each business might have like hundreds of transactions, but when you put together for 1,000 companies, it's going to be huge volume altogether. So the problem remains same, but here these are different legal entities. So you need to, the current infrastructure what is available have to be deployed at scale, right? So you need to deploy the same solution for 1,000 companies separately and managing it. And if you see the cost when return on investment is thin. So what we are working on now is to deploy a SaaS solution which can be leveraged by these kind of companies to automate these processes. See, the volume remains same, the problem remains same, but the number of legal entities comes in the picture is different. Say, like as Siva mentioned, Siva was handling like 150 legal entities. Here, managing 1,000 such legal entities is definitely tough, and rules between these companies are going to be different, and data capture needs to be done is going to be different, and definitely capture. I mean, I say now, which means like your validation logics might go in a different direction. Your data points, you might need more data points for certain companies versus other companies. So a lot of combination permutations in place. All this cannot happen without having a seamless integration between a HyperApp and an ERP solution, and which is exactly what we are working on now. So to offer such solutions to the SMEs on a single umbrella.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lokesh. Sudesh, as a consultant who's working with organizations, which are the hard to automate or problems worth solving that you have heard them talk about, which is exciting, not the run-of-the-mill problems worth solving, but which you think could be breakthroughs for hyper-automation and RPA?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the general philosophy behind the hyper automation is really to look at verticals and areas where there is a great deal of consistency in the way the processes are managed. However, there are differences in terms of nitty-gritties of what needs to be done from a business perspective, right? And I feel that generally pretty much a number of processes really fall into the same umbrella of how the activities are performed from a back office perspective. But there are three key areas where the automation gets challenging, or where it has not really been explored as much, right? So one, as was earlier mentioned, one is of course the unstructured data, the extraction of information from these documents, which are fairly complex. There is no control over how the information could be presented. It could just be conversational even, right? The second one is, of course, the decision intelligence. That is, how do you deal with the data that you have really come up with, right? So, what kind of interpretations that you're really going to be making from the data inputs that you're getting. The third one is really, building out predictive analytics in terms of, how do you use the data in order to be able to, predict a certain outcome, creating or looking at exploring opportunities from a business perspective, right? So I think these are three areas. You might actually find all of these existing in one single process, or you could actually see these as independent independent problems within the business. So for example, when we are really looking at the pandemic era per se, right? So we are looking at organizations really looking at rapidly increasing their capital and operating expense and reducing the operating expense rate, and in that process create transparency around how things are going to be managed. So looking at things like procurement spending analysis, end-to-end inventory rebalancing, capital spend diagnostic, portfolio rationalization, and all of it being done in a more real-time basis, right? Just so as to make sure that you're triggering actions on the basis of this data that is coming in, and or taking preemptive actions on the basis of what you really see, rather than the cost of delay could be significant.
So I like the perspective that you just shared, that playing a role in the flow of work rather than kind of breaking and waiting for people to take action. So real time.
Yeah.
Shubhra, I'll come back to you, but I know that Shriji gave me a extended timeline, and I wanted to ask him the last piece, which I'm going to ask all of you, is that what does the future look like? So if you had a crystal ball to gaze at and predict what let's say 3 years from now, where would you see this evolve? What's your prediction, Shriji?
So I think technology is going to evolve much faster. And I also see that my business counterparts are becoming a lot more savvy about this. And hence the roles that is out there is probably going to become a lot more interesting in the way how technology will help drive business. The boundary lines could become a little blurred, I think. An IT guy becoming more business savvy and business guy becoming more tech savvy, right? So that's going to be an interesting scenario, I think, for the better, I think. I mean, there could be exceptions, it can be for the worse, but I think predominantly it'll be for the better is what I feel. And I think one of the interesting things that you actually asked me earlier about the nudges. We used to have the traditional BPM layers, which is supposed to help with the flow of the process from one stage to another. Has there been success in that? Patchy, I think. And I think with the newer technology that we have there, that is actually going to become potentially a reality in a much more cooler way. So a classic example where FMCGs, I'm sure Shubhra's company would have tried, Unilever would have tried. When I was in RB, we tried for it. P&G is doing it as well. I think not when I was there long ago. It's about nudging the sales force, right? Same thing can apply for other areas also within the organization. It could be with our contract manufacturers. It could be with our vendors. It could be with our any other partner that we are talking about. It could be my supply planner working with my logistics person. It could be my demand planner working with my production planner. All those areas could see parallels, like where we have seen FMCGs nudging sales folks. All those things can start to happen in all these processes. Instead of being in the traditional way of working with the traditional systems, with the traditional UI and UX, I think that is going to evolve, and that's going to become a lot more embedded in the way that we do our work. I think in the workplace. I think that's going to be very exciting.
Wow, I'm
sorry, I need to log off.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sriji,
Thank
and lovely having you on the panel.
Thank you very much.
And we will wrap up and we'll let you know the final conclusions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'll just take a leaf out of what Sriji just shared around user experience. And coincidentally, recently I was talking to Krish and sharing with him that I would love to see a customer onboarding process which is augmented by RP and HyperApps, where I don't have to upload the document and also fill in fields when I'm interacting with KYC requirements, etc. So, and user experience becomes a very important factor because you have the data and you have technology which can not only read it accurately, and can even read handwriting and reach accuracy levels which humans probably possess. So user experience is one area where probably we'll see leaps in the coming years. Coming to the vision for the future, so what do you think the future could look like? Shubhra, your views around Sriji talked about FMCG always having kind of leading in some of these areas. So would love to hear your perspective given your experience at Unilever.
So Debu, I would say that, so we have a very good saying in Unilever to say that it's better to disrupt ourselves than be disrupted. So if you look around, it's obviously an accepted fact that technology is going to disrupt. And I'm not going to say that the work itself or there will be less work. It will change the way we conduct our work. And to borrow a leaf again from what you said, if I talk about customer lifecycle, and customer lifecycle right from the stage of distributor appointment to probably handling queries or probably doing claims management and doing his end-to-end probably stocks management and giving him a reconciliation of his ledger. If I talk about not way back, all these processes were quite manual, which meant that probably the interfaces were very manual and it did not lead to that level of customer satisfaction. If I draw our experience in HUL on this perspective, a lot of these processes, or rather most of these processes, have got automated right from the stage of how do you do KYC, how do you do credit assessment to see that the distributor is robust, and at the same time having an app which can address their queries real time, give them ledgers at the month end where they have a personalized ledger which gives them a statement of how much claims has been settled, what has been the claim settlement time. So for me, technology is going to help us. It has indeed. It is going to probably make our jobs far more simpler, remove the redundant parts of the job, and probably enable us to focus on more on decision making and where human being intellect is required. I don't see that analysis and the fact of business partnering, which is where probably I play a role now, going away with technology. It will only enable us to probably do our jobs much more efficiently.
Great. I love that perspective about making things, so disrupting yourself and also making life much easier. I read a report, global report, which said that India ranks, I think, somewhere around about 130 out of 140 countries in terms of happiness. So we are one of the least happy countries. And I can only think of one of the contributing factors being the redundant tasks that we do of transferring information from one platform to the other. I think it takes up around about 20-25%. I was doing a rough calculation at one point of time. 20-25% of most of our jobs is actually transposing data from one platform to the other, which probably Krish and Jiffy team probably can make our lives easier if they can make it much more pervasive. So I'll come to you, Logesh, for your views around where do you see the future, and especially from your platform and automation as a service SaaS offering.
Yes, Debo. See, till now we are talking about digitization and digitizing the records, right? So we'll move on to running the business digitally, right? So from where we stand at digitization to running the business digitally is what we're gonna see in the near future. And when companies like Jiffy, the solutions what they provide are the key components in it, right? As you mentioned, all the data available, what we are going to capture in an ERP system or in a process is already available elsewhere else. So how efficiently we're going to bring them on board with high accuracy is the key. And again, till date, we were only helping, we are only putting our efforts in digitizing the data. We are not using it yet. So the next era will be to how to use the data, how to make money out of it, right? So the companies are going to, when the larger ones already started working on it, and now we are we're helping SMEs to do the same. So from getting the data to using the data is what I see as a new era.
Nice. Great. So I would like to wrap up more from the perspective that there is a very interesting insight in neuroscience that people take very harsh decisions when they are very hungry. And I know we are around the lunch break time, so I wouldn't want a bunch of hungry panelists and hungry members of the audience. So I'll hand it back to Ekta. Thank you so much, Sudesh, Logesh, Shubhra, and he's already left, but we thanked him. It's been awesome having a conversation with you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to moderate this panel. So I'll get out of the way of hunger and hand it back to Ekta. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you for moderating it so well, Mr. Debo, and thank you all our panelists. So before I wrap up, I would like to invite Sangeeta again from Jiffy on final thoughts and a closing note. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Yeah, thank you, Ekta. So first of all, let me thank Debu and the awesome panel for all their views. I think what we can take over and what I've noted down as simple points is, Sriji's view on what he can possibly do in the future in terms of automation and how he's probably delivering or is delivering business line, bottom line to the business. And, interestingly, Shubhra's views on how the risk of losing intimacy with the processes, loved that, and continuously doing review of these processes. I think that's an interesting concept again. And Logesh, of course, we've been working very closely. So I do look forward to you being able to really make use of the data, probably to do more and more business to the SMBs. And Sudesh, again, predictive and real time, I think that's enriched. And going back to what Vishnu and Chris covered, I think giving us insights into a world of opportunities that really goes beyond the current state of automation, and Shiva's insight into real life experience and where the future of F&A really lies. I think those were the key takeaways for me. And I hope you all listening to this session had a wonderful time as well. I really enjoyed it. It was very interactive, very informative. And I hope the HyperApps that Jiffy is offering leads the way and paves the way for a completely new marketplace. And that's our vision. And that's where we're getting to a very interactive user front end, a customer experience, and finally automated processes and data that you can do predictive and prescriptive. So that's the world we are getting into. So with that, again, I don't want to stop anyone from lunch. So Ekta, over to you if you want to conclude. If there are any questions, anything you want to ask us, please feel free to write to us Ekta can will have our contacts. You can write to us. Happy to do the demo, invoice processing, HyperApp, and things like that. Look forward to engaging with each one of you all who have attended the session. Thank you. Thank you, Ekta.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you so much. So I am sure that everybody had a great session. And once again, I would like to thank all our thought leaders, starting from, Mr. Vishnu sir, Krish, then Shiva sir, and all of our panelists, Mr. Debra, Brat, Shriji sir, Shubhra, Logesh, and Sudesh for being here and making this panel very interesting and sharing your great insights. And I hope everybody understood like how HyperApps brings in flexibility you need in today's dynamic business environment. Also, to the audience, we'll be sharing the feedback form with you, which also mentions your one-on-one brainstorm virtual meet with Jiffy.ai. You can mention your interest there. As Sangeeta said, that anybody, any questions, if you need to know more about Jiffy.ai, we are there to help you out and reach them. So on this closing note, I would like to thank our partner Jiffy.ai and all our thought leaders for taking out your precious time on weekend, being here, sharing your insights, making this forum very interactive and interesting, not missing our lovely audience, again for being here on the weekend morning and taking out your precious time. We'll be shortly sharing the video link with you and requesting all to please respond to our feedback form. That really helps us to improve. So thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.